I still remember the day I handed her the box, the way the evening light slipped through the curtains and painted everything in soft gold, as if the world itself was trying to soften what was about to happen. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, carrying that strange stillness that comes before a storm. I had been holding that box for hours, maybe longer, tracing its edges with trembling fingers, rehearsing 100 different ways to say what needed to be said. But no matter how many times I practiced, the words refused to come out right. Because how do you explain something that carries years of pain, love, sacrifice, and secrets, all in one moment? Alina walked into the room with her usual confidence, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, her phone still in her hand. She barely looked at me at first, too absorbed in whatever world existed behind her screen. She had grown into someone so different from the little girl I used to know, someone distant, someone who no longer paused to notice the small things. But I still saw her as that child sometimes, the one who would run into my arms after a bad dream, the one who believed I could fix anything. "I got you something," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. She glanced up, slightly annoyed, as if I had interrupted something more important. "What is it?" There was no excitement in her tone, no curiosity, just impatience. I stepped closer and held out the box. It was small, simple, nothing like the expensive things she was used to receiving from others. No shining wrapping paper, no elaborate ribbon. Just a plain, old box that looked like it belonged to another time. She took it from my hands, her fingers brushing against mine for a brief second, and even that felt unfamiliar. Slowly, she opened it. Inside, resting on a faded piece of velvet, was the key. It was old, slightly worn, its edges softened by time. It didn't sparkle. It didn't impress. It didn't look like something that could change a life. Alina stared at it, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "You call this a gift," she said, her voice rising with every word. My chest tightened. I had expected this, but it still hurt more than I was prepared for. "It's important," I said gently. "You just need to." Before I could finish, she snapped the box shut and threw it toward me. The movement was so sudden, so full of anger, that I didn't even have time to react. The box hit my shoulder and fell to the ground with a dull sound. The key slid out and landed on the floor between us. For a moment, everything went silent. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us, forcing us to stand there and face what had just happened. I looked at the key lying there, so small, so insignificant in appearance, yet carrying a weight that neither of us could fully understand in that moment. And then I looked at my daughter. Her face was flushed with frustration, her eyes burning with something that wasn't just anger, it was disappointment, resentment, something deeper that had been building for a long time. "My friends get real gifts," she continued, her voice shaking now. "Cars, jewelry, things that actually matter. And you give me this?" Each word felt like a blow, but I stood there, absorbing them, because I knew this wasn't just about the key. It was about everything I hadn't said, everything I had hidden, everything she didn't know. "You don't understand," I said softly, my voice barely holding together. "Then explain," she shot back. I opened my mouth, ready to tell her everything, to finally reveal the truth I had been carrying for so many years. But the words wouldn't come. Because once I said them, there would be no going back. Because the truth would change everything. And I wasn't sure if she was ready for that. So instead, I stayed silent. And in that silence, something fragile between us cracked just a little more. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head as she stepped back. "Of course you won't explain," she said. "You never do." Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing through the house until they disappeared completely. I stood there alone, staring at the empty doorway, feeling a kind of emptiness I hadn't felt in years. Slowly, I bent down and picked up the key. It felt heavier now, as if it carried not just its own secret, but the growing distance between me and my daughter. I closed my hand around it tightly, holding on as if it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Because deep down, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a gift. It was a turning point. And whether it would bring us closer, or tear us apart completely, was something I could no longer control. My friends get cars, jewelry, designer bags, and you give me this? Alina's voice echoed through the house, sharp and unforgiving, as if she wanted every word to leave a mark. I could see the disbelief in her eyes, the way she looked at me like I had failed her in some unforgivable way. It wasn't just anger, it was expectation collapsing into disappointment, and I was standing right at the center of it. I bent down slowly, my knees aching more than usual, and picked up the key from the floor. My fingers wrapped around it carefully, almost protectively, as if I were afraid it might break under the weight of her rejection. The metal was cold against my skin, but it steadied me in a way nothing else could. "You don't understand," I said quietly, keeping my gaze on the key for a moment before looking back at her. "Then explain," she demanded, throwing her hands in the air. "Explain how this is supposed to mean anything to me." There was something in her voice that made my chest tighten. She wasn't just asking about the key, she was asking about everything. About every time I hadn't given her what she wanted, every moment she had felt less than others, every silent sacrifice she had never seen. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to explain everything right there, to take away that look in her eyes and replace it with understanding. But the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't something I could just say in a few words and expect her to accept. "It's not just a key," I said, choosing my words carefully. "It opens something important." She stared at me for a second, then let out a short, bitter laugh. "What? Some old cupboard? A storage room full of junk?" "No," I replied, my voice steady but soft. "Something much more than that." "Then what is it?" she pressed, stepping closer now. "Why won't you just say it?" "Because I'm afraid," I thought. "Afraid that, even if I tell you, you won't believe me. Afraid that you'll see it as too little, too late. Afraid that the years of silence between us have already done too much damage." But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I hesitated. And that hesitation was enough. Her expression hardened immediately, as if my silence had confirmed everything she already believed about me. "See," she said, shaking her head. "You can't even give me a straight answer." "It's not that simple," I tried to explain. "It is that simple," she snapped. "You either care enough to tell me the truth, or you don't." Her words hit deep because they carried a truth of their own. I had spent so many years holding things back, convincing myself that I was protecting her, that I was waiting for the right time. But maybe, in doing that, I had only pushed her further away. "I do care," I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my effort to stay calm. "Everything I've ever done has been for you." She crossed her arms, looking away for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "It doesn't feel like it." That hurt more than anything else she had said. Because in her world, love was measured by what could be seen, touched, shown to others. And all the things I had given her, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the quiet struggles, none of them had a shape she could recognize. "You think I haven't done anything for you?" I asked softly. "I think you've done the bare minimum," she replied without hesitation. "You raised me, sure. But that's what you're supposed to do. That's not special." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls pressing closer as her words echoed in my mind. "Not special." I looked down at the key in my hand, the one thing that carried proof of everything I had never been able to say. The one thing that could change how she saw me, if she would only give it a chance. "This key," I began, but my voice faltered. She watched me, waiting, but this time there was no patience left in her expression. "What about it?" she asked. I tightened my grip on it, feeling the edges press into my palm. "This key is your future," I said finally. She blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. "My future," she repeated, her tone skeptical. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I paused again, struggling to find the right way to explain something that had been buried for so long. "It means there's something waiting for you. Something your father left behind." At the mention of her father, something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe even curiosity, but it disappeared almost instantly. "You expect me to believe that," she said. "After all these years, suddenly there's something he left for me, and it's connected to this random key?" "It's not random," I said firmly. "Then prove it," she challenged. I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to see past the anger and find the little girl who once trusted me without question. But she wasn't there anymore. In her place stood someone who needed more than words, someone who needed proof, something real and undeniable. And I realized then that no matter what I said, it wouldn't be enough. Not yet. Fine, she said when I didn't respond immediately. If you can't explain it, then it clearly doesn't matter. She turned away again, this time heading toward the door. Alina, I called after her. But she didn't stop. Keep your key, she said over her shoulder. I don't need it. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving a silence that felt louder than her shouting. I stood there, the key still clutched in my hand, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. I had thought this would be the moment that brought us closer. Instead, it had pushed us even further apart. And as I looked down at the key, I couldn't help but wonder if I had already waited too long to make things right. That night, the house felt emptier than it ever had before, as if the walls themselves were holding onto the echoes of our argument. I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, the old clock ticking steadily in the background, marking each passing second with a quiet persistence that only made the silence more noticeable. The key rested in my palm, its cold surface pressing into my skin as though it was trying to remind me that it was real, that everything tied to it still mattered, even if my daughter refused to see it. It had been 20 years. 20 years since that day, the day everything changed, the day my husband placed this very key into my hand with a seriousness I had never seen in him before. I could still remember the way he looked at me, his eyes filled with both urgency and trust, as if he knew he was leaving behind something unfinished. Amanat Hai, he had said softly, his voice weaker than usual, but steady enough to carry meaning. A trust. For Alina. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. I only knew that whatever it was important enough for him to hold on to until his very last days. And when he gave it to me, I felt the weight of responsibility settle deep within me. Give it to her, he continued, his gaze never leaving mine, but only when the time is right. That sentence had stayed with me ever since. Only when the time is right. For years, I held on to that belief, convincing myself that I was doing the right thing by waiting. Alina was just a child back then, too young to understand the value of something that wasn't immediate, something that didn't sparkle or impress. She needed stability, love, and guidance, not secrets tied to the past. So I waited. I watched her grow from a curious little girl into a determined young woman. I saw her dreams change, her priorities shift, her world expand beyond the small circle that once included only me. And with every passing year, I told myself the same thing. Not yet. But somewhere along the way, not yet had quietly turned into maybe never. Until tonight. I tightened my grip on the key, closing my fingers around it as I leaned back against the chair. My eyes drifted toward the window, where the faint glow of streetlights cast long shadows across the room. It was strange how something so small could carry so many memories, so many emotions, so many unanswered questions. Had I made a mistake? The thought crept into my mind slowly, but once it was there, it refused to leave. Maybe I should have told her sooner. Maybe I should have trusted her with the truth before the distance between us grew too wide to bridge. Because now, when she looked at me, she didn't see a mother who had sacrificed everything for her. She saw someone who had failed to give her what she wanted. Someone who kept secrets. Someone who didn't trust her enough to be honest. And perhaps, in her own way, she wasn't entirely wrong. I closed my eyes, letting the memories come back to me more clearly. The hospital room. The quiet hum of machines. His hand in mine, growing colder with every passing minute. You have to promise me, he had said, his voice barely above a whisper. Promise me you'll keep it safe. I promise, I had replied, my throat tight with emotion. And promise me you won't tell her, until she's ready. That second promise had been harder to make, but I had nodded anyway, because I trusted him. I trusted that he knew what was best for our daughter, even in his final moments. But what if being ready didn't come with time? What if it came with understanding? And what if, by waiting for the perfect moment, I had missed every chance to help her understand? A soft sound pulled me out of my thoughts, the distant noise of a car passing by outside. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was Alina returning home, if she would walk through the door and give me another chance to explain. But the sound faded and the silence returned. She wasn't coming back. Not tonight. I let out a slow breath, opening my eyes and looking down at the key once more. It looked the same as it always had, simple, worn, unremarkable. And yet, it held the power to change everything. If only she would give it a chance. If Alina ever loses her way, I murmured to myself, recalling the words I had once read in his letter. Loses her way. Was that what this was? Had she lost her way, or had I lost mine? The line between the two felt blurred now, tangled in years of silence and misunderstanding. I stood up slowly, walking over to the old cabinet in the corner of the room. My hands moved almost automatically, opening the drawer where I had kept the letter hidden all these years. For a moment, I hesitated, staring at the envelope as if it might disappear if I touched it. Then I picked it up. The paper felt fragile, aged by time, but the handwriting on it was still clear, his handwriting. Strong, steady, unmistakable. I traced the letters gently, feeling a sudden wave of emotion rise within me. You always knew what to do, I whispered, as if he could somehow hear me. So tell me, what do I do now? Of course, there was no answer. Only silence. But even in that silence, I felt something shift inside me, not clarity, not certainty, but something close to it. Maybe the right time wasn't something that arrived on its own. Maybe it was something you chose. And maybe, just maybe, I had been waiting long enough. I looked at the key in one hand and the letter in the other, realizing that both of them were pieces of the same truth, a truth that could no longer stay hidden. Because whether Alina was ready or not, she deserved to know. And this time, I wouldn't let fear stop me. Not again. I knew what I had to do. The key had waited long enough in my hand, the letter long enough in the drawer. I couldn't delay it anymore. Not after all these years, not after the walls between us had grown so high. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my coat and the key and headed out into the quiet night. Alina wasn't home yet, but I knew where she had gone. Her favorite cafe, the one where she always sat for hours scrolling through her phone and tuning the world out. I arrived, stepping softly onto the wet pavement as the streetlights flickered above. I saw her through the cafe window, headphones on, eyes distant, completely unaware of the storm that was about to enter her life. I walked in and gently tapped her shoulder. She looked up, startled, eyes wide. Mom? What are you? I held up the small key. I need you to come with me. Please. Just trust me this once. She hesitated. Her eyes flickered between skepticism and curiosity. After tonight, she asked quietly. Yes, I said. After tonight. The ride was mostly silent. The city passed by in streaks of orange and white light, the quiet hum of the engine filling the gaps where words had failed us for years. She didn't speak, and I didn't try to force it. There was a fragile tension between us, like a rope stretched to its breaking point. Finally, we arrived at an old apartment building on the edge of the city. Its bricks were weathered, the paint peeling, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air. I handed her the key. This opens something your father left for you, I said. Alina turned the key in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. This is really his, she whispered. Yes, I said softly. Everything he wanted you to have starts here. She approached the door and inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. Click. The door creaked open. Inside, sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a fully furnished apartment. It was pristine, warm, welcoming, something she could have called her own. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she just stood there, stunned. Alina, I said, stepping beside her. This is your father's gift. He wanted you to have it when the time was right. She turned to me, voice shaking. I can't believe this. All these years. I pulled her into a hug. It's not about the apartment, I said softly. It's about the love and care your father and I always had for you. The sacrifices, the patience, the waiting, all of it was because we wanted the best for you. Tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered, I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't understand before. It's okay, I replied. You didn't need to. But now you do. And I want you to know, you've never been alone. She looked around the apartment, then back at me, eyes shining. I think I finally understand. It's not about the gift itself. It's about the thought, the trust, and the love behind it. I lost sight of that, didn't I? Yes, I admitted. But that's why I waited. Because love isn't about immediate understanding. It's about letting it grow, letting it sink in, even if it takes years. She smiled through her tears, and in that moment, the tension, the anger, the years of silence, they all melted away. We didn't need words anymore. The key, the apartment, the letter, they were symbols of what we had carried silently for so long. And finally, the weight lifted. Alina walked through her new apartment, touching the furniture, opening the windows, letting the sunlight wash over the room. She turned back to me, hugging me again. I won't forget this. I'll never take it for granted. I held her close, letting the relief and gratitude fill me. You never have to. You only need to remember one thing: love lasts, even when it's hidden, even when it's hard to see. And for the first time in years, we felt whole.